Om Jnana Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So as you can see, today we're having the real birthday celebration for 4 devotees, Bhakti Yoga practitioners. You can get, as Shastra says, you can get a material birth in any species of life. You can have a mother and father, a biological mother and father in any species of life. But only in the human form of life do you have a chance to have a spiritual father and Veda Mata. The Vedic literatures are considered mother. So these 4 devotees have shown their qualification over a sufficient period of time. And they have made the conscious, voluntary decision to take up initiation vows and formally declare their relationship with their spiritual master. They have read Prabhupada's books sufficiently, and they have thought about it and made their individual decision. You may wonder about the history of such a ceremony. This is a ceremony of Harinam Diksha, formally enrolling the candidates in the Academy of the Hare Krishna mantra. Now, as we often explain, and as you've read in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu explains that as soon as the tongue touches the Hare Krishna mantra, there's an effect. And that effect doesn't wait for initiation. So you may wonder, well, then what's the point of initiation? It's to get more credit by showing Krishna your commitment. The example we often give is, like in civilized societies, unlike what we have now, in civilized societies, there is marriage because the commitment demonstrates something for the individuals involved and for the whole society. Commitment shows that there is actually some feeling and the possibility for deeper feelings to develop. Without commitment, we have an animal society. You know how the current climate is in Kali Yuga, which ridicules anything about lasting commitment. The only lasting commitment you should have in Kali Yuga is dedication to your senses and how your senses feel at the moment. But this is not human life. So this formal enrollment into the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra shows Krishna that you're serious about going the distance. And therefore, Krishna takes you more seriously. But I'll give you some brief understanding of this ceremony. The way this ceremony is going now is a special adaptation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. You see, in traditional Vedic society, initiation means Gayatri Mantra, Brahma Gayatri Mantra, what we call second initiation. In traditional Vedic society, that's considered the real initiation. But Srila Prabhupada split that traditional second initiation into two, Harinam Diksha and Brahma Gayatri. In other Gaudiya Vaishnava traditions, there's not such a ceremony. In the style of a traditional village guru, back when gurus didn't travel and every village had its local sadhu, the initiation would just be often a private ceremony where the disciple sits with the guru and declares his or her allegiance. And of course, in a traditional society, he was generally declaring his allegiance because every woman was married and just took up whatever position her husband had. Obviously, we live in different times today. So, in the traditional Vedic initiation ceremony, it's not really much of a ceremony at all. It's the village guru would sit with his disciple, and the disciple would declare that they have a relationship. In some, even today, in some Vaishnava traditions, there's no declaration of vows following the four regular principles, or if there is, it's done privately. But Srila Prabhupada wanted a big public display. You are making these promises in public. Everyone is watching. You are promising to follow these rules all your life, and look at all the witnesses. Not just the spiritual master is there, but the deity is there. The Vaishnavas are watching. The fire is a witness also. So he wanted what you might say, a big production so that you get the point. And this declaration of vows is also Prabhupada's way of enforcing the importance upon the participants. The chanting of at least 16 rounds, the following the four rules. In some Vaishnava traditions, there's no promise to follow the four rules. Why? Because there's the basic traditional assumption from antiquity that everyone follows the four rules. They don't have to promise to follow the four regular principles. But guess what these days? So the four rules, as we often tell you, don't make you a transcendentalist. They make you a human being. And in previous ages, or in hundreds of years ago, there was no need for anyone to make such a promise. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meeting, no gambling. People would be shocked to be asked to declare such vows. And what do you think I am, an animal? But these days, in our four-legged human society, we have to make such vows. And the four regular principles make you in sattva-guna, the mode of goodness, so that the ground is much more fertile for the Hare Krishna mantra to catch fire. The wood is dry, so the spark can ignite the wood very easily. And by making that declaration of the four rules and chanting the rounds, you have something to hold on to that gives you strength when the winds of Maya blow very strongly, which, in case you haven't noticed, does happen. The mind and the senses become battered, blown here and there by strong winds of Maya, and you can cling to your initiation vows. Just like on a fast day. Janmashtami especially, Gaur Purnima, where you fast till 6 p.m. or even till midnight, your stomach rumbles. And as I often point out, and you've heard me say, you see the little kids eating because they don't have to fast. And naturally you start feeling some craving. But then you check yourself. Nope, it's Gaur Purnima, can't eat till 6 p.m. Or it's Sri Krishna Janmashtami, can't eat until midnight. But you do feel some rumbling in the stomach, and it can be something to tolerate. It's a little bit austere. So these initiation vows protect you in the same way. There may be some longings, some desires, and you take shelter of your initiation vows. No, I promised I wouldn't do those things. Or there may be some apparent inconvenience in chanting your rounds. But you remember, I promised. And somehow or other, through thick and thin, I have to keep my word of honor. The word of honor is the sign of integrity. But as you know, these days, word of honor means nothing. Persons can take initiation vows and then 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, well, but I feel different now. And everyone should understand that. Times change, people change. I was younger when I took those vows. Circumstances happen, stuff happens. So this kind of rationalization is so common these days. There's no honor. There's no integrity. There is simply allegiance to your mind and senses. What are your mind and senses telling you right now? Follow that. That's your vow. You are surrendered to your mind and senses. So this transcendental ceremony is meant to give you something to hold on to. You're making a formal declaration. As we explained earlier, in traditional Vedic society, initiation is actually Brahma Gayatri, what we call second initiation. But Prabhupada split the Harinam Diksha off from the traditional second initiation and made something called first initiation. Now, according to Vaishnava tradition, the Guru accepts the karma only on Brahma Gayatri initiation. But Prabhupada's system is that the Guru accepts the karma on the first initiation. Regarding himself and his unlimited compassion, when asked about it, do you accept the karma on the first or second initiation? Because we've heard that the Guru only accepts on second initiation, so unless you have first initiation, you're out of luck. Now, Prabhupada said, I take it on the first. He said, what can I do? I'm prepared to go to hell for Lord Chaitanya. I can't say I'm prepared to go to hell, but I'm prepared to follow in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada. So, we naturally implore those candidates taking initiation to please take it seriously. Circumstances may change, but don't let the circumstances rock your boat so that you relinquish your vows. So I thought to give a short history of initiations in the overall Vedic scope as well as in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. So again, this publicly declaring of vows is something Srila Prabhupada established so that the initiates would take it very seriously. What used to be a private agreement between guru and disciple, and without necessarily any vows, just I agree to be your disciple, now has become a very solid and firm ceremony. So much so that now other Vaishnava traditions are imitating. So you may think it's quite a bit of pageantry. You see the fruits there, the sacrificial fire, the priest is ready for action. There'll be mantras chanted, the fire will be fed with oblations. So what about the fire? The sacrificial fire is actually Vishnu. Lord Vishnu accepts the offerings through the fire. But we're not offering the persons into the fire. The candidates are offering into the fire, and that's why they have the grains and the banana. So this is meant to be a memorable event. I wonder how many of you remember your initiation ceremony. I remember my initiation ceremony, my father actually showed up and took some pictures, and it was a big thing for him to do that because I found out years later that he was trying to push my mother when I moved into the ashram. He was trying to push my mother to commit me to a mental institution, but my mother wouldn't sign. And both parents had to sign. So for him, a year later, to show up at an initiation ceremony was a big thing for him. He had even considered paying $20,000 to so-called deprogrammers, otherwise known as kidnappers in the courts, to drag me out of the society of devotees and bring me to my senses. But anyway, he showed up at the initiation ceremony, and that's to his eternal credit, in spite of his offenses previously committed. And I remember in my youthful enthusiasm, youthful bhakti enthusiasm, because my father, as many of you know, was a disciple of Hugh Hefner. So he was not concerned at all with the reactions to his actions. He had his program, which he kept up until the age of 65. So I got him real quick. There was, one of the after the bananas are put into the fire, there were some bananas that weren't burnt completely. So I said, "Dad, take this banana and eat it. You'll get a human form of life in your next birth." He gobbled it up. That much he could do. So everyone remembers their initiation ceremony, and it's a glorious occasion because after many births and deaths, these jivatmas, these conditioned souls, are in a situation to solve all their problems. To solve the problems that mundane politics, economics, sociology, and so forth can't touch, although making a big pretense of solving these problems. So we, as always, ask the Vaishnavas, the Vaishnavis, please give these candidates your blessings, that they can be strong on the bhakti path amidst the turbulent times we're living in today. So please give them your blessings, your encouragement. The senior devotees can give them their wisdom and guidance. As often we say, it takes a village to raise a child. Similarly, it takes an association of devotees to see that the young devotees are properly raised. It's not just one person's job. I remember even growing up as a little kid in New York City, times when all the mothers were at home not working and the fathers were all at work. You could be a middle-class family in New York City and only one parent was needed to work. Even my mother had, at that time, 3 children. So I remember wandering through the whole neighborhood in New York City as a 4 and 5-year-old. No problem. No parents were worried. Why? Because all the mothers were at home in the whole neighborhood and they would report you to your mother if you did anything wrong. So in that sense, the whole neighborhood was raising the children. And that's New York City, not rural New Zealand. I remember I could wander a few blocks away from home as a 5-year-old, alone, or with my little friends. And you couldn't do anything wrong because all the mothers were home, watching out of their window, and they'll report you to your mother. So there was some semblance of real civilization, some semblance. Everyone understood it takes a whole neighborhood to raise children. So the children could run throughout the whole neighborhood, 4 and 5-year-olds, and no one was alarmed, no one was paranoid. Across the street from where I lived, there was a 10-acre patch of forest in New York City. So the kids would just wander in the forest and play. The mothers weren't worried at all. We considered the lady who lived next door, we called her Auntie. When my mother first moved there, when she was 22, and her next door neighbor was 22, they both had a child, but they refused to talk to each other. But when they finally broke down their barriers and got to know each other, because you're supposed to know your neighbor, at least back then you were supposed to know your neighbor. So when they finally got to know each other, they became lifelong friends for 60 years. So we would call that lady next door Auntie, even though she's not related. What to speak of other people in the neighborhood? If my mother had to go somewhere and was going to be late coming home, she would just call up a neighbor and say, "Can you make lunch for my kids?" And that was just considered normal. I don't know, is it still like that today? You don't even know your neighbors. Let's speak of that. Asking them to make lunch for your kids. The neighbor could be 2 blocks away, but my mother could call up. "I'm late. I'm sorry. My kids aren't having lunch. Can you make something?" Sure. So we had lunches from all different nationalities, Spanish rice and Middle East this and that, because the neighbors were from all over the world, because of New York City. So my point is that the whole neighborhood was raising the children. Similarly, we need strong devotees to help raise all the spiritual children. It's not that I'm omniscient and I have my eyes on everyone. I'm all over the world, and so assistance is required. So this is why we ask that every devotee try to have a mentor. We spoke the other day about how the mentor system throughout the world, I've seen, ebbs and flows, rises and falls, and rises again. Just one of those things that needs constant reviving. So we ask that somehow or other try to have some mentor who is your friend and can give you guidance. Just like we heard this morning about Bharat Maharaj explaining that, as Prabhupada amplified, he was in a crunch situation. He became attracted to a small deer. Although he had left his position as chief executive of the whole Earth planet. He successfully dropped that attachment. He successfully retired from family life. But some or other, he tripped up by becoming too attached to a small deer. And he didn't consult about it. And therefore, that led to his thinking of a deer at the time of death and taking his next body as a deer. So we all need someone to consult with. And that's why we try to have this mentor system, so that, as we always say, you don't try to reinvent the wheel every year. Because what happens when you're in some tough situation? When Maya is pounding on your door, or you think it's a very intricate situation, just like Arjuna thought at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. It's always like that. You feel that no one's been through this before. No one understands. No one can give me any advice because my situation is so unique. It's always feeling like that. So those who are serious about proceeding on the path back to Krishna know how to take guidance, know how to have mentors, how to keep good association. And in this way, you stay healthy from all the viruses circulating that infect our consciousness. So again, remember, just like it takes a village to raise a child, in a real human society, it takes a village or a neighborhood. Similarly, in our bhakti society, it takes relationships, positive relationships with devotees to help us stay on track. All right, now we'll call up the individual devotees for making their vows. We will start with Janik. Janik arrived in New Zealand how many years ago?
4 years ago, almost.
4 years ago as a tourist, yes?
Yes.
And then what happened?
I had made some contact with the devotees in Australia beforehand, and I had a good friend in New Zealand who persuaded me to come become a volunteer in Bhakti Lounge for a start and commit more to the practice of Bhakti Yoga.
So you left Germany with one mindset. What were your goals when you left Germany?
I had a lot of fruitive goals of making big money.
You're going to make big money in New Zealand?
I didn't know much about the price.
So anyway, you had goals of making big money. You had a work-study visa.
I had a work visa, and that was for Australia, 2016. And then my mindset changed there.
So you came to New Zealand and started attending. You were volunteering at the Bhakti Lounge.
Yes.
And immediately you said, "This is what I want to do," right? Not exactly.
I wasn't so much into serving.
What were you into? The prasad, eating, right?
Yeah, and the yoga classes.
So between the spiritual food and the yoga classes, you thought that would be it, huh?
Yeah.
What happened?
association of the devotees in Bhakti Lounge in the PK ashram. I transitioned to the PK after 3 or 4 months.
And then you eventually went to the Brahmacharya ashram in Auckland?
Yes.
How many years have you been in the Brahmacharya ashram in Auckland?
I went to the Brahmacharya ashram March 2020.
So how your life has turned out so different from what you would have thought. Greatest fortune has come upon you. Please give that greatest fortune to others. So Janak is a very good member of the Brahmacharya ashram. He distributes books. He's a devastating chef. For those of you who are wondering a little bit what it's like in the Brahmacharya ashram, every Monday they have their blowout feast. Otherwise, during the week, they eat rather simply, I think. But on Monday, they're allowed to go for it. And that's when the cooks demonstrate all their talents. So Janak has become a very good cook, and it's a great credit to the Brahmacharya ashram. All right, we'll ask you for your promises. What are the 4 rules?
No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, and no gambling.
And what to do every day?
Chant at least 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra on beads.
All right. Your new name is Nitai Jivana Das. Nitai Jivana means the life energy of Nitai. And who is that? Gauranga! Nitai Jivana Das. He's the servant of Gauranga, who is the life energy of Nityananda.
Nitai Jivana Prabhu ki
All right, Rajan. So Rajan is from where in India?
Uttarakhand.
Uttarakhand. And is it fair enough to say you are Premalata's recruit? That's wonderful. So in this way, ladies, Premalata is showing you one option. You train up your own, you know. Is she? Where is she? Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, this is a possible option. You meet someone who's suitable and you influence the person to become Krishna conscious, and that way everyone is benefited. So we thank Premalata Devi Dasi for her contribution and bringing such a fine young man to Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet. So what are the 4 rules?
No meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex.
And what to do every day?
At least 16, chant 16 rounds every day.
Very good. Your new name is Golokesh Das. Krishna is the controller of Goloka, especially Goloka Vrindavan. Golokesh Das. All right, you can get up.
Golokesh, Golokesh.
All right. Now we have a couple. So Oliver, you can come up. So Oliver is a real dyed-in-the-wool New Zealand farmer. We like to see more of them in Krishna consciousness. You used to manage a dairy farm of 1,000 cows? Yes.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that one day, through preaching, Krishna will bless us with what Prabhupada asked for in New Zealand, that be an agricultural project. Growing food so that devotees can actually produce some food in ample amounts. I'm not talking about a garden patch. As we know, at this point in time, agricultural project would be millions of dollars in New Zealand. But we're hoping that somehow or other we're able to accomplish that desire of Srila Prabhupada. In any case, Oliver has the experience. Now we add Krishna to the experience, and then we have a winning formula. What are the 4 rules?
No meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling.
What to do every day?
Minimum of 16 rounds of Mahamantra.
All right, your new name is Dasyamrita. Dasyamrita means the nectar of service.
Dasyam Rita Prabhu Gay.
All right, Shania. Shania's husband is Dasyamrita. And she's a very dedicated, Krishna conscious devotee, wife, and mother. And we thank Juan Yatra and Rasa Yatra and Goroy and Sundarangi for taking good care of these young ones in Bhakti. They live on the property of the Yatras in Kaiwaka. What are the 4 rules?
Meditating,
Your new name is Tarun Yamrita. Tarun Yamrita means the nectar of youthfulness. That obviously can't refer to us with our material bodies. It refers to Krishna. It also refers to one of the baths that Srimati Radharani takes in the morning. She's youthfulness personified, who takes a bath, not in ordinary water, but nectarian youthfulness. So that's Tarun Yamrita. So you have the Amrita family.